Warning. This podcast features the truth about owning and operating mobile home parks. The following program is not designed to be sexy. It will not hype you up on MHPs. Rather, this is a raw take on this industry and how you find your own path to success. Welcome to MHP IRL, Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, with your host, Ryan Norris.
Welcome, everybody. Today, I have Mike Conlon, CEO of Affordable Communities Group. They have 5,200 lots in 9 states. And just a little bit about Mike Conlon, friend of mine, lives here in North Carolina with me, still, for whatever reason, is a Green Bay Packers fan, despite the wonderful Panthers jersey I got him, which I didn't quite see in the walls.
That's been burned already, so no worries.
Mike, always a pleasure to spend time with you, man. You got 5,000 lots. What's it like to just be retired and do absolutely nothing?
I don't know if I'd say I'm retired, but it's been a great run for us the last, really, since 2011 when we had 5 parks and we sold them all with the anticipation of all the distressed stuff finally hitting the market in early 2012. It took a while, but since then we've purchased probably about 7,500 lots and we've sold about 2,300. And what you and I have talked about is we sold our way up. We sort of bought whatever we could get, mostly distressed stuff, worked it hard, built it up, and then sold it to buy bigger, nicer, more quality stuff. And really, we bought over 1,000 spaces the last 3 years. So there's still some deals out there, but they're more difficult, obviously, than they were.
Fascinated about your strategy. You're a super successful guy. We'll get into that. But for the bulk of my listeners, they're very aspirational, and most folks I talk to have this goal of 5,000 lots. Before we touch on the strategy aspect, can you tell everybody a little bit about, give them a little carrot. What is it like decades later after you've built this little mini empire, or maybe big empire?
Yeah.
Tell them, what is your life like? What is a day in the life of Mike?
Well, for me, it's been really good, obviously. I mean, a lot of people love my lifestyle. I mean, the cash flow is fantastic. Obviously, our assets have appreciated greatly. But I think the biggest thing I did is I put the right people in the right place. Chris Berry, who you know well, is my chief operations guy, is fantastic in the business. Just hired another regional guy for Atlanta who's been a friend of mine for 20 years. We got great financial people, great manager. So it's really about putting that team together. I mean, when it started, it was Chris and I was behind the desk. We were in the apartment business back then, obviously. And, I got behind the desk sometimes, which Chris probably hated because I probably screwed it up more than anything else. But I was driven by acquisitions. That's what I like to do. I'm a big picture guy. Most of the people around me are more detailed guys, and that's where you want to fit your business. But it's a really good place to be at 5,000 where I don't have to do anything tomorrow. I don't have to show up for a month and everything is going to stay the same. That's a great place to be. It takes a long time to get there, but it's definitely doable with the business.
Well, you did it right, and one big thing I respect about you is you also are generous with your time. So, for example, you sit on the board of Wake Tech here, and like you were mentioning earlier, you're the coach of the Little League basketball team.
Yep.
So you're not just someone who went and was hyper successful and then got on a yacht and just in your own little island and away from everyone. You're actively donating and your time and your money helping in the community.
Yeah, and I think you realize once you become more successful, you have more money, really. Money it's not going to buy you happiness. It'll buy you some more comfort, and obviously everybody wants a certain level where they're at to make them more comfortable. But for me, it's about the more you can give back to help other people is the most fulfilling thing that you're going to do. It's not about, hey, I got this great deal, I'm going to crush another deal, then I'm going to go to St. Bart's and hang out. I'm just not that type of guy. I need to be actively engaged with a lot of people.
Big time respect for that. Seriously, that's my dream one day, to start a scholarship and really help education. So this industry, as you've seen over the last several decades, has become branded as a passive investment. You buy a park, it's not a whole lot of work. And to a certain degree, that can be true in my experience. I bought a little dinker park. It's 42 lots, and it is absolutely a dream. It runs extraordinarily efficiently, and I've seen the exact opposite of that. But for the folks who haven't quite bought one yet, or maybe own one or two, in your opinion, at what point in time is it no longer passive, or is it ever not passive?
Well, I don't think it's ever completely passive. I mean, I still work 20 to 25 hours a week, I got a very flexible schedule, so I can do what I want. Some days are longer if I'm traveling somewhere to go look at parks or whatever. But my life has gotten much easier, obviously, that way. I think it's to the point when you can hire somebody like a Chris Berry, and that's probably somewhere around 1,000 lots, maybe 1,500, where you have enough cash flow and you're willing to give that up to pay somebody $100,000. Chris makes a lot more than that now, but when we started, if he made $100,000, he's going to work 40, 50 hours a week for you. It just takes a lot of pressure off, and that's where I think the standpoint where you feel like, hey, I've made this, and it's going to get a lot easier from there. The first deal is always your toughest deal. The first handful of years are always your toughest years. I look back on it, when we started in the apartment business, 2002, it all seems like a blur because it happened so fast. But it's been 16 years. It's been a long time. But it's that point where you feel like I don't have to go to this park every day, or I don't have to go to that apartment complex and make sure stuff is getting done. And you have somebody like that can handle most of the stuff. And the other thing is somebody to handle your accounting. I did my own accounting probably till 2012. And when you finally get out of that, it frees up so much of your time. So those are the two things I would say.
I kind of want to take a bit of a transition here now, Mike. One thing I think you did extraordinarily well is you grew organically, and you kind of hinted at that a little bit earlier, which was you didn't go out and raise a bunch of money, buy a bunch of properties, and then try and figure it out. You took the opposite approach. You started off in wealth management, then you transitioned to apartments, and then you found your way into mobile home parks. But to your point, you get to 1,000 lots, you find your Chris Berry, and then you slowly add the pieces on, and you do it slowly and organically and sustainably, rather than growth for the sake of growth, and then I'll figure that part out later. Can you talk a little bit more as to how you did that and what the advantages you think that you have versus someone who takes the opposite approach?
Yeah, I think the reason we did that is being from the Midwest originally, you tend to be more conservative. So in the apartment business, we bought 1 8-family, and that's all we had for about 6 months. And we figured out, do we like this business? Do we not? And once Chris determined that he liked it, I liked it, I felt like we could grow it, we sold the financial planning business. In the park side, we bought 1 park, an 80-space park in Florida, and said, let's try this for a year, see how it goes, see how the management is, and if we really like it, we'll start to buy more. And so that worked out really well for us because we got to experience and say, okay, here's what we don't like. Before we have 5,000 lots, this is what works and this is what doesn't work. It was almost like a test case, and that made our life a lot easier going forward because we weren't going to make the same mistake on 5,000 units. It was just on 1 80-space park, which is easily correctable.
Another thing that I think you do really, really well is you are obviously a CEO now. You have 20 employees, give or take?
Yep.
Talk to us a bit about what skills that you need now versus when it was just you and Chris, and how you develop those, and what should, as someone like myself who owns several parks and I'm slowly growing, what do I need to be developing now at my level and even a little bit a couple steps before my level?
I think that the big thing for me as being a CEO now is my skills were always sort of suited for that back then because I'm more of a big picture guy. I'm okay with the details, but I'm much better at thinking, okay, where do we want to be 2 years from now, 5 years from now? What are the hidden things that I'm not thinking about that are around the corner? Is there a recession coming? Is whatever may affect the business? I'm always thinking about that. I read a lot. I try to be aware of what's going on so I can anticipate a little bit. And I think that's a sign of an entrepreneur is you try to anticipate what the next big obstacle or problem that you have to get around. But, really, when you look at it, you have to be able to make decisions, and you'll learn making decisions from being in your park. You'll never be a better manager than to sit in your own office and take rents or talk to people about issues. I've had a lot of conversations about different clients who come in or residents who come in and the crazy stuff that happens. And you don't really appreciate it until you're sitting behind that desk.
Right.
If you start out as a CEO, you have no relation to what's going on. And this is a different business. It's not, we've heard a lot about people saying, oh, you just buy it, it's passive, turnkey, whatever, you don't have to do anything. I totally disagree with that. You need to be hands-on all the time. You need to know what's going on. Things can change fairly quickly in these parks. You cannot let them get away from you because you'll get a bad element in there. So from a CEO, big picture, being able to make decisions, and then hiring the best people you can find.
That's great. There's an awesome book that I highly recommend to all you listeners. It's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And trust me, there's amazing things in that book beyond the title, which kind of says it all, right? So being a really good car salesman doesn't mean you're going to be really good behind the F&I desk. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be really good behind the sales desk or as a general manager, right? So to start off like you did on the front lines, making sure everything's running right, even with Chris Berry being like, Mike, go home.
Exactly, yeah.
You learn very vital skills there, although it may not necessarily get you where you're going at the next level, the CEO level, to be able to already start to be thinking about, all right, what do I need to be good at in a few steps down the line is vitally important. Next big thing that I want to talk about with you is some of your major milestones and how you changed your perspective.
Once we sold, we had 5 parks initially, almost all projects, and we sold them in 2011. And then we waited 6 months till we got our first portfolio deals that basically came out of the Great Recession in 08, 09. So that was a big milestone for me because we finally had a fair amount of money that we could invest, but also I felt like we were taking to the next step. One thing I always tell younger guys getting into the business is don't have too many projects. We had too many projects going at one time, and it's very time consuming. Everyone says, hey, I want to buy this park that's 60% occupied. I'm going to go put 50 homes in there, and I'm going to fix the roads and do whatever. We call it our playbook. We sort of do the same thing. It gets to be a lot of work, and it limits your growth. Now, if your goal is to make $100,000, you probably only need 500 spaces at the most. You see prices have gone way up in the last couple of years, so it's a little bit more than it used to be. But if you really want to get to that next level, you got to get some cash behind you. So I think raising some money is a good thing. But once you take your baby steps and learn the park, you've operated in the park, you know what mistakes you make or what doesn't work for you or what market you like or don't like. I mean, the big thing now is rental homes versus lot rent. I'm still a lot rent guy. I don't want to have a lot of rental homes, but it's really changed in the business the last couple of years. But I think if it's just what your personal goals are. Now all of a sudden we're at 5,000 units and I'm like, how do we even get there? You don't even know sometimes because you just keep doing what you're doing. And I love to do the acquisitions, and really the whole thing about selling up is buy whatever you can get initially, make sure you buy it right, obviously, and buy it cheap, fix it up, and then flip it after 2 years and roll that money into something else. That's what I did. It worked really well for me. And I will say that the bigger, nicer parks are easier to run and make more money.
Well, that's one thing that I wanted to talk to you about is when we first met about 3 years ago in 2015, your advice to me was endgame, which I preach on here. I sound like a broken record, but that is so crucial to be able to reverse engineer what you want. Like you mentioned just a minute ago, if all you need is $100,000 a year, you don't need 5,000 lots to do that.
Nope.
But the interesting thing too is that if you're going to try to compete with the institutional buyers and you've never bought any properties, or you're like me and you own only a handful, you're going to get crushed by these people who have extraordinarily low cost of capital. So you don't necessarily have a chance to compete when it comes to the 200, 300 plus lots. So I'm competing in a different capacity than you are on the smaller properties. But for folks like me and folks who want to buy their first couple parks, who do want to achieve that scale, talk a little bit about endgame and also about how you were able to sell your way up.
Yeah, initially in 2012, we bought portfolios of parks that were distressed. We bought a Bank America portfolio that had 6 parks in it. We still have a couple today. Sold the other ones and reinvested the money. Then we bought from Natixis. This is a French bank. Somehow they had these 10 or 12 parks. It was their only mobile home park loans, and we ended up getting, I think, 10 of the 13, and I believe I have 3 left right now. So we sold all those, fixed them up and sold them, bought bigger, nicer stuff. I think things changed for me. I think it was about 3 years ago. I sat down with Matt Follett, who's out in the West Coast. He's done really well in the business. And he said to me, now is the time to get rid of your C stuff and buy more A and B stuff in prime big metro locations. And so that's what we've spent the last 3 years doing, cleaning out anything that's, say, below 100 spaces and buying bigger stuff. We've got 7 parks over 200 spaces now, which is really nice. Those parks are very profitable, very good. So that was my threshold to say, okay, I get that. That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go do that, execute it. In the last 3 years, that's what we've done. We've sold a bunch of parks, but we've also bought a bunch, and we got to that level. And really, the end game for me is the more quality you have, the more the bigger buyers want your stuff.
Right. Because that's where the big money comes in to buy out.
Correct.
Now, that is a really interesting point that not a lot of people think about, which when I talk to most folks, they want to buy and they want to hold forever. But you haven't necessarily done that. You said so you've bought 7,000 give or take, and you've sold 2,000 give or take to sell your way up. That's a very interesting strategy that not a lot of people are considering.
Yeah, just because when you get smarter in the business and you understand and you get some opportunities by networking or whatever, or knocking on some mom and pop's door for 2 years and all of a sudden they're like, hey, I'm ready to sell my 150 space park, and you're the first call and you get that deal done. You're like, hey, I need to raise some money. So either I'm going to go out to outside people or I'm going to fund it organically by selling the stuff I had. I was always somewhat leery about going to outside people. I have maybe 15 people now that I work with, most of them friends of mine for a long time, that are fairly well off, and they saw I did well after a couple of years. So it's been easier, and I would strongly suggest you have money to work with to go. But if you can grow organically, it's a lot easier because you keep control. I'm the majority owner in every single deal I have, so I have the final say. I can get something done in 5 seconds. If we need to get it done, boom, we get it done. Where you find guys who are money raisers, it's just a little bit of a different control issue. You're going back to the big money guy all the time, whatever. I just never wanted to set myself up like that.
I think that is a good transition into my next point, which is that I'm seeing a ton of people focused on rapid growth for growth's sake versus your growing slowly and organically. Talk a little bit about the control you give up when you bring in private equity money or you have a giant fund, and why you've opted not necessarily to go that route.
Yeah, I've talked to all the private equity guys, and they obviously want 5,000 spaces and they throw big numbers, which is always somewhat enticing. But for me, it's always been about control. I was in a situation when I was younger where I sold a financial broker dealer to a large insurance company, and you realize the day you sell, you get a nice check, but the whole game changes. You're an employee, you're not in charge anymore. Even if you have the title of CEO, it doesn't make a difference. You're answering to somebody else. And so that I learned that lesson early on. So now I've been very hesitant to sell. If I'm going to sell, I'm going to be done with the business. I'm going to be out here to the parks, you take them, and I'm too young to do that. I'm thinking they are great investments for my kids, who some of them are in the business, and we should get a stepped up basis and all that stuff. But for me, it's always been about control because I feel like I can stay on top of the issues much quicker. I can make changes in strategy or whatever. Chris and I talk about it. If we need to get something done, we'll have a 10-minute conversation about it, and we'll say do it, and boom, it gets done. And I think you run from an operational standpoint much tighter, better parks because you're taking care of issues right away. You're getting on top of them. Where if you got to go through the channels and it takes you 4 days to get a response and you really have no control, I just don't want to be there. I'd just rather be done with it instead of working through something
Bureaucracy would kill you. But and not just that, business is brutal. They'll slit your throat in a second for an extra $100,000.
Yeah, that's where I could never get comfortable with anybody, is that they have access to a lot more money than I do. And if they ever want to sue you, they have unlimited funds to just sue you for years and years, and there's no way you're going to match them.
Ian always brings it up, which I think is brilliant. It's that even if you win one of those court cases, that doesn't keep in mind the emotional toll it takes on you to be under constant litigation for years.
This really good buddy of mine who invests in some of the parks had a different litigation issue over a piece of land down in Orlando, and they're in their 11th year of litigation. The lawyer fees are over $7 million, and they may end up winning some money at the end, but 11 years. It's taken so much time, and they would have walked in the beginning of the deal for $100,000, and now it's just gotten way out of control. So that's what happens when you do that. And so it really what you want. I totally get people who are raising a bunch of money and buying some parks. You and I have discussed this. I don't think it's going to be after the next recession, it's going to be the same as it was in 2010, 11, where you could barely get a CMBS deal done on a park. Nobody understood the parks. It was a very forgotten asset class. Obviously, that's all changed. And when you have a lot more bigger players in the business, they're not going to give up the parks easily, even if they're not doing well. They're going to hold them. They have the staying power to get there, where I was still buying from individuals in these bank portfolios who just got way over their head and managed it improperly and stuff like that. So I get that you want to raise some money, and I definitely think you need to have some money to get in the game, but I still go back is take a couple steps, buy a park or two close to your house so you can get it, you understand what the business is going to take, and then you can start running with it.
So talk to me a little bit about advantages and disadvantages of folks who have maybe already raised $5, $10, $20 million in a fund, or have a group of investors and they want to go buy, and they want to grow for the sake of growth. Is it necessarily that bad of a thing to do that? And what are some pros and cons from your perspective, having done the opposite of organic growth, that challenges that they're going to face and good potential outcomes and also bad potential outcomes?
My goal has never been to be the biggest owner. My goal has always been to be the most profitable. And I think in any business, when you grow for growth's sake, you get in trouble when the market turns against you or something in the industry happens. So I think you need to be very careful about that happening. I get that if you're more of a money raiser, you get paid fees when you place parks, when you buy parks, ongoing management, stuff like that. For me, it's been better to go slower, take control or keep control all the time and build my way up and only buy the parks that I want to buy. I got a great group of people that I can go to if I need a little extra money here or there. Again, I'm always the majority guy in my deal, so I'm a lot different than other people. But when you're doing that, you can always go and get the money when you find a park that fits your niche. The problem with raising a lot of money, it's someone puts a gun to your head and say, these investors want to get returns on their money, so you have to go buy something. It may not be your best deal, but you have to buy it. And you're also looking at it and saying, if I want to get paid, I need to go buy something. So it does present a conflict of interest that you're buying just to buy. It maybe not be a great deal, but hey, I'm getting money placed. I'm moving on to the next one, wherever. Where I only buy if it fits my criteria, where I can get at least 15% cash on cash by the second year at worst case scenario. And I still like to get my deals up to 20% cash on cash within 2 years. It was a lot easier a couple years ago with the pricing's changed, but that's still my goal. It's always about profitability for me.
It can be going from a job to another job if you have, like you said, the proverbial gun to your head. Hey, you've got all this money and now these people are expecting results. So that whole, I'm going to quit my job, buy some mobile home parks, be my own CEO, and not have the rat race anymore. It sounds like what you're saying is that might not be true if you partner with the wrong folks, or even if you partner with the right folks and things start to go south because you bought too much or you bought too aggressively. The one thing you told me when we first met, I remember this because I thought it was brilliant, which was 5,000 lots for you is kind of the point where I'm teetering on being a little too corporate. And when it becomes a little too corporate, that comes with its own host of other issues. And you've kind of found a sweet spot, or you're pretty close to that sweet spot.
Yeah, I definitely, for us, it's right around this 5,000. Really what we're doing now is if I find a really good opportunity or a market that I want to be in, I'm going to trade out I probably got 3 or 4 parks that I still want to get rid of, sort of cleaning up the bottom that I consider C-level parks I just don't want longer term. So I still got some of that money that I'll place in some of the better markets, but it's very selective at this stage of the game. And it's what works best for you. You definitely need to be careful when you get into bed with other people and they have more control on the money side, because it is a job. They want you working. They expect you to respond to them, to make sure the returns are where they're at. And I can tell you the worst thing in the world, and we had this on one of the apartment deals, is when you don't make money on a deal and you still have to work it. And usually those deals are the hardest ones because you made a mistake or this or that. It's brutal. And you don't want to be there. So if you focus on profitability, not growth, I think you're going to be a lot better off in the long run. If you have the money available and you're comfortable with your partners, I get why you're going with the growth, because there is only so many parks and there's a frenzy out there right now to buy the parks, to get whatever assets you can get, fix them up later. I don't think that's a bad strategy, but it's a riskier strategy.
Another quote that you had that I actually used in one of my prior episodes, which rings true to what you're saying, is you make your money at the closing table. Can you talk a little bit more, add a little bit more color to that quote?
It's as simple as years ago, we buy at a 10 cap and you figured if you fix it up by increasing rents, adding homes or whatever, you're going to be able to sell for an 8 cap and you're going to make more money. But it's really about knowing what your plan is day one so that you purchase it at the price that you know it's going to be worth $500,000 or $1 million more. And I try to conservatively make sure that if I need to get out of this in 2 years, it's going to be worth $500,000 or $1 million more at a worst case scenario. And that's obviously adding homes, which is a lot more difficult than people think, but does definitely increase value, makes the park look nicer. But the biggest thing is raising rents. I mean, if you can find parks, which we did over the last few years, where the rents are $50 to $100 under the market and the markets are growing, that's the easiest way to make the most money in this business. And you need to be aggressive raising rents. I don't know if you need to raise rents $200. Our goal is somewhere between $25 and $50 right off the bat when we buy a park. We barely get any pushback from the residents at that stage. And if you're trying to buy a park when it only works if you raise the rents $100, It's doable, obviously, and you can do it. I just don't think it's the right thing to do with a lot of these people because they're all living paycheck to paycheck.
They are. And one thing that you did a few years back, I remember you told me this, was you turned up the heat a little bit too much. And then you had the courage to actually go and face those folks and hear all their complaints and allow them to meet the owner. You had a lot of courage to actually meet those folks. And then you ended up, lowering the rent bump down?
Yeah, we still got a decent bump out of it, so it wasn't a bad deal. But I think we were trying to go up $90 because it was way below the market. But what I didn't realize is most of the residents, $90 is a lot of money. Right. And the other thing that we didn't realize until a couple of years ago when we really changed our system is a lot of these residents, especially the older ones, are deciding between rent, food, and medicine at the end of the month. And they can't make all three. And obviously they got to pay their rent, otherwise they're out in the street. So what we've done with all our parks now is hook them up with a charity and to bring in free food, to do the spring fling or whatever it is with the bouncy house and stuff like that, and to try to give back to them. I never realized that there was that much of a disparity in the haves and the have-nots and the poverty levels that some of these people are making $8 to $10 an hour, and it's very difficult to live in America, even living in a mobile home park right now. Yeah, and if you get hurt and you miss a week or two of work, forget it. Your whole life gets turned upside down. If you get one medical issue that the hospital is trying to get you for $2,000, I mean, that really makes your life difficult. And I think we need to have some compassion to that effect. I mean, everybody wants to raise rents and we raise them consistently, but we tend to be in the $15 per month, maybe $20 in some of in the better markets per year. But that's still the 3% more in the cost of living side of things, where we could raise it a lot more. The markets are a lot higher. I always feel from an investor standpoint is you can't be too greedy. These are very profitable investments when you get them going right, but you also got to remember that the resident is your customer. And for us, because it's a lot rent thing, the less turnover we have, the better. So the more that we can make their life better, the less turnover we have, and it's just more profitable for us. I think that is a big reason why I'm doing my podcast, is because I want to discourage would-be slumlords. Yeah. Because when an industry is marketed as a passive investment, that tends to attract an element, which is folks who want to set it and forget it. And they forget that there are actual people on the other end who are struggling, who are really struggling. Yeah. And, now we have firemen, policemen, teachers. Teachers starting off are making $26,000. You can barely live on that anymore. And disparity, I mean, I don't know what the answer is. You and I talk politics all the time, but who knows what the answer is. But, I mean, you have to be aware that they're your end customer. And the more you can do, tutoring programs. I'm shocked that most of the bigger parks, we bring in food a couple times a month, bags of food that some of the charities pick up from the grocery stores. And the need and the demand at the end of the month for the food is amazing. And that makes me feel bad a little bit. And it makes you put yourself in check to say, hey, we can't go raise these rents $100 tomorrow. It's going to affect a lot of families. It's so easy to make a model in Microsoft Excel and forget that the numbers that you're entering into your computer are affecting human lives. Correct. And everybody has issues, obviously, the parks and different things happen, but you always try to do the right thing. You always try to take care of the house. There's been a hurricane and we have never had a direct impact, thank God, but some trees go down or whatever, and if it's on a resident-owned home, we'll pay for it, and they can pay us back over a year or whatever. I'm not going to leave somebody hanging without a house, that type of thing. So you dip into your pocket when you have to, because you remember, without them, your business doesn't really exist. So you need the people. They need somewhere safe, affordable to live. And obviously there's a huge amount of them, so it's great for the business. But on the other hand, we've seen it a lot of times. You and I have both seen it. The slumlords, you can get washed out of this business real quick if you don't keep up with your parks. Yeah. So yes, there's a portion of this behavior that is charitable, but it's also a good business decision. These are your clients. And the thing about the free market is that if you are not serving your client to the best of your abilities, someone else is going to come in and do a better job of it, even in a place that has a natural supply cap like a mobile home park. Yeah, and like you're saying, it's obviously easier to be more complacent in the mobile home park because someone's not building one right down the street from you. And in all the big metro areas, they're almost all full, so it's very hard for someone to move their house anymore. It's too expensive and there's nowhere to go, really. So That is the case. But on the other hand, there's still people, and you still got to do the right thing. And everyone can make enough money in this business. And when you look at it from a profitability standpoint, saying the more that I can do for these people, which means the less turnover, which means more money in my pocket. That's how we want to look at it from a corporate standpoint. But from a personal standpoint, you just got to do the right thing.
So where I want to end off is to address this golden age of mobile home parks. Were there ever really just 10 caps everywhere? And if so, when did that effectively end?
You know, it's really interesting because I was talking to some friends of mine the other day, and they were saying, do you remember the days in 2010, 2011 where we bought these, in early 2012, we bought these great portfolio deals that were probably 20 caps when we really looked at them. And they're not there today, but you know, everyone says, hey, Mike, you've done really well. You've accumulated 5,000 units. I looked back and said, I should have leveraged everything I had and bought anything I could have possibly bought 2012, 13, 14, 15, whatever it is, because whatever you bought, the price is higher now. So, you know, you can look at it that way too. Nobody knew it was going to come to this, obviously. Right. So you did what you did. But back in the day, it was common and probably started to phase out when my friends Dan and Dave got the article in Bloomberg and the institutional guys got a hold of it. And then now the chase for yield, obviously, has been crazy. So
then the next relevant question, Mike, is if 10 caps were a little bit more common back then, what challenges existed? You mentioned earlier CMBS was essentially a non-factor.
Very difficult to find a 3-star park that CMBS was. In 2011, it was tough to get a CMBS deal done with a family park. By 2014, it completely changed. And obviously in the last year or two, with Fannie and Freddie getting actively involved, you don't even need CMBS anymore because the agencies have a better product. But it's really, back then, you think about the glory days, the challenges were that most of the parks were distressed that you bought. You bought them from a bank, so they were either 50% occupied, or they're a bunch of homes in disrepair, or the homes didn't come with the deal and you had to negotiate the homes separately. One or two of the deals, we had a wastewater treatment plant where it needed to put a couple $100,000 into it. But I can go through the deals. There's that one park we bought for $25,000 because nobody wanted it as part of the portfolio. So we said, what the heck, $25,000. Well, a couple years later, we sold for $500,000 or $600,000. So that worked out really well for us. And a lot of examples of that. And that allowed me to sell my way up. It may take people a little bit longer now because we bought them so cheap and all of a sudden the market changed over a couple of years. But there's always going to be challenges in the business. It's just, again, as I tell people, don't have too many projects. Too many projects will burn you out. It'll use up a lot of your capital. The bigger projects, whether it be a wastewater treatment plant or adding a ton of homes, is always more expensive than you think it is. Ultimately, the reward is there because you got a better park, more value. But in the meantime, you don't want to go through a lot of agony to get there. So we only try to have a couple projects going on at one time. We always still there's a spot that we're developing over in Gastonia that sort of starting from scratch. That's our sort of first one that we're doing that way just because we own the land. So it's been a little bit easier. But you always want to keep looking for those projects because that's where the money's going to be made. That 60 to 70% occupied park where you can add some homes. You don't have to fill up all the way. Add 10, 20 homes to it. Be able to raise the rents $25 to $50 over 2 years. You're going to have a bigger value assuming you manage it right. So I would encourage newbies to, doesn't have to be a 150 space park. It can be a 50 space park and try to build it up. And then your goal should be to own one 150 space park or one 200 space park, whatever it is. They're a lot tougher to get because everyone bids on them. And if they get the market, forget it. But it's out there. It's doable. The business is going to be good. The demand for affordable housing in all the big cities is through the roof. I mean, here in Raleigh, where they could care less about mobile home parks 3 years ago, they're begging me not to sell because they know that things are going to change. And it's really happened on the apartment side where, all these new apartments were put up, which obviously put pressure on rents. But the thing that's happening now is the developers are going in and fixing up these old apartment complexes, kicking everybody out and jacking up the rent. That's the new big play in the apartment. So rents are going up across the board and there's no place for people who make $8 to $14 an hour to live. And that's the sweet spot for mobile home parks. So I'm looking for some type of distress. The easiest one is to send a letter out and bump the rents and not have to do a lot or add a couple homes. I've been leery about doing 50 or 100 homes. We did that in the beginning, but those are super big projects. Yeah. You got to have somebody on the ground besides the manager who knows what's going on, who can sell and do all that stuff. So if it's your only project, go for it. But once you get a few parks, it gets to be a lot more difficult.
Well, Mike, I can't thank you enough for taking the time.
It's been awesome. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm sorry for your Packers. Come on,
Maybe next year.
Hey, I'm surprised you're not trashing my Panthers right now. But
They're garbage anyway. It's nothing to say.
Mike, much appreciated, man.
Okay, bud.
Would having my due diligence list help you? If so, I will let you have it for free. That's right. My list that took me 3 years to develop and includes plenty of fixes for mistakes that I made that now you can avoid. All absolutely free. All I ask for in exchange is leave me a 5-star review and a comment. Screenshot your comment after it goes live and email it to me at my website, archimedesgrp.com. Afterwards, let's connect. This episode was inspired by a listener just like you. Even if you don't have any ideas for future episodes, let's still connect, as I'm sure there are ways you and I can help each other out. I'm looking forward to chatting soon.